here we are at 1985 for ACDC's history, and we find ourselves at a bit of a crossroad. On one hand, they released their 1984 special 74 Jailbreak, which was a compilation of old Bon Scott-era songs recorded from 1974 to 1976. Before that, we reviewed their Flick of the Switch album in 1983, which I claim to be the last in their prime, which roughly lasted from around 1976 to 1983 or 1984 if you want to get really technical. Now, we're in 1985, which is basically the downturn of the band, so to continue on the discography, I am going to review their first mediocre album, in my opinion, aside from maybe Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, Fly on the Wall. Now, this is noted by many people to be one of the worst ACDC albums of all time. Now, I don't think it's that bad. See, it even has a clever tongue-in-cheek joke on the cover. See, fly, I, see, I right there on the wall. And it's got some awesome font here. But any misinterpretation could lead to someone thinking that this album is entitled Flow on the Wall. But hey, since this isn't a progressive commercial, let's get on with the review now. Basically, this is when the band started to kind of drift apart a little bit, especially in terms of after they just fired Phil Rudd and recruited Simon Wright to the fold. So Simon Wright never really got along with the rest of the band members. He never really had that cohesion, that chemistry that he would later find with Dio in the 90s, I believe it was. Not really familiar with Dio's history, so please forgive me if I'm wrong. All I know is Simon Wright was in Dio's band at some point in time. But then again, I digress. He is on this album, and he is in the Flick of the Switch music videos, which were released in 1983, 1984, circa around that time. So basically, this is the start of AC/DC's downward spiral into mediocrity. Now, that being said, I do actually like a lot of elements on this album here. Right there, Fly on the Wall. It is a very good album guitar-wise. The guitar work is actually very, very good. That's probably one of the best things I can say about this album. The vocals themselves are very good. However, it seems like there's a lot of vocal feedback, there's a lot of distortion, there's a lot of echoing in the background. It seems like it wasn't necessarily recorded in the right setting, I suppose. And that being said, the vocals are overshadowed by the loud, overpowering guitar and drums and bass and pretty much everything else. The bass isn't necessarily audible, but you can definitely hear it in the background behind the guitars. So with that being said, the drum work on this album, you can actually tell a little bit of a stylistic difference, a style change from Phil Rudd, who had been with the band since day one, and Simon Wright, who would remain on this, on these albums for the next roughly 3 albums, if you really want to include the next one, Who Made Who. So basically, what makes this album so mediocre? What makes this album good, in a way, and what makes this album terrible? Well, I will get into it. So, Fly on the Wall, the title track, has a very killer, kick-ass guitar riff in the beginning, but once the vocals start, I mean, it's one of those things where you can really dig the track, especially at first. I mean, when I first heard this album, I was defending it. Like, day one, defending it. But when I started to listen to more of it, and when I started to listen to, say, Flick of the Switch, or For Those About to Rock, or, I mean, hell, even Back in Black, or, Powerage, or anything like that, I started to realize that this album, while I thought at the time that it was very good, it's not as good as their older material. I heard the analogy on a forum post around roughly 2006, 2007. It sounds like Brian Johnson got the lyrics off of a cereal box, or whoever wrote them, Angus Young, Malcolm Young. It sounds like they got the lyrics off of a cereal box. And to an extent, I do agree. To an extent, also, I do not. Because on Fly on the Wall, the title track, the lyrics are actually very well crafted, especially in the idea and just the way the lyrics kind of come together. The structure overall definitely fits the topic. So, Send for the Man, Back in Business, Hell or High Water, all those songs have pretty good lyrics as well. The only songs that I can really complain about lyrical-wise are Shake Your Foundations, First Blood, Sink the Pink is alright, I suppose, and Danger. So other than that, I mean, the lyrics are kind of mediocre, but they're still pretty decent. So when it comes to the song structures, though, I really gotta pick out Danger. I mean, Danger is probably the worst song on this entire album. I absolutely can't stand it. I mean, the reprise, the chorus, Danger, danger, don't talk to strangers. Keep away from the danger, yeah. That's pretty much the entire song right there, with a chugging riff that's dun 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 dun. That's pretty much it. I mean, it's a mediocre crap fest practically, and Brian Johnson doesn't even give it his all vocally either. The drums are repetitive, the bass just isn't there at all, and the guitar work is just bland, pretty much as bland as you're gonna get. So overall, with Fly on the Wall, like I said, it's a very good song. Shake Your Foundations, there's actually a remix of it that's available on Who Made Who. I'll actually review the remix when I review that album next, but I actually like this version better. The distortion definitely hides and masks a lot of Brian Johnson's vocal troubles that were going on during this time. I mean, hell, he could still hit the highs relatively well, I suppose. I mean, I'm not going to say that he's totally lost it at this point. That wouldn't happen for another few albums. But I digress. His vocals are very, very scratchy in this recording, and definitely the vocal distortion hides that fact. And the guitar work on this album overshadows the vocals, and that is especially prevalent in the song Playing with Girls. The Playing with Girls, the song actually has kick-ass guitar work. Probably some of the best guitar work on this album, but that's a shame because it has the worst singing, and with the exception of Danger, of course, the worst mix, and you can barely understand what's going on with the entire thing. You can barely understand what Brian Johnson is trying to say or sing if you really want to go that route. So let's back up to Sink the Pink, though. I know I'm going in a random order, but I'm kind of going off what I think of the album off the top of my head. Sink the Pink, I already went over Danger, so Sink the Pink is a pretty decent song. It's got a really kind of interesting intro, and really clever lyrics as well. First Blood is the third song, and kind of another sexual one. Kind of goes along the lines of Sink the Pink. Same thing. Let's see, Stand Up. This is an interesting one. It's got a really weird music video. I suppose it's got kind of those, 80s-esque kind of effects to it. The song itself, though, is very simplistic. It's got a very simplistic melody. They aren't necessarily going out of their way to do anything crazy with the guitars, but I mean, I kind of like it. It's catchy. Hell or High Water and Back in Business. Back in Business has probably the second or third best guitar riff, or in my opinion, on this album. You can definitely understand what Brian Johnson is saying, and the mix is set up in a way where you can actually get an idea, a big picture of what the song is trying to do, and I like that. That's one of the only things, the only songs on this album, that does this, that doesn't really have any issues with it. So one of my favorites on the album. Hell or High Water, like I said, really interesting guitar riff, and the structure of it is very sound. I like it. Send for the Man is a pretty hard rocker as well. It's very heavy, one of the heavier songs on this album, and a decent closer to say the least. So basically, what do I think of this album? Well, it's an AC/DC album. Just another AC/DC album. I mean, it's good, but it's really kind of debatable because I like Back in Black, Flick of the Switch, and all of their Prime albums a little bit better. Do I like it better than Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, which I said was my least favorite Bon Scott album? Probably not. I mean, this album has enough issues with it as is, with the recording, with the production, with pretty much everything else that's going on with it. I mean, it's just a mediocre album. I mean, I like it, and it's got some pretty decent guitar work on it as well. Very, very high point for AC/DC in that retrospect, in that aspect. But when it comes down to it, this album is just kind of hit and miss. So I'm going to rate it a 7 out of 10. It's pretty decent. It's worth trying out and checking out. But when it comes down to it, this is pretty hit and miss for AC/DC. If you want to get into the band, I would suggest Powerage, Black Ice, Back in Black, High Voltage, anything like that. And for those about to rock, we salute you. So with that, it is a 7 out of 10 for me. That is the final verdict. This is Midnight Strike 3625. Keep calm and rock on.